In 2001, Barbie starred in her first movie, Barbie and the Nutcracker. Since then, Mattel has released a grand total of 44 Barbie movies. But of course, this Barbie is pretty different from this Barbie, and this Barbie, and this Barbie. So I thought it would be interesting to analyze exactly how the Barbie movies have evolved over the last 25 years. Hi, I'm Sasha, and I like to take deep dives into childhood media in order to escape the horrors of adulthood. I'm coming at you hot off the heels of a 2-week-long Barbie movie marathon where I watched all 44 Barbie movies back to back. I've broken down the movies into eras based on changes I noticed both on screen and behind the scenes. Along the way, I'll share some of my thoughts on each movie, as well as some fun facts you may not know. Quick warning that this will not be spoiler-free. I mean, you've had plenty of time to watch all of these, but just in case. So get comfy and prepare to see a lot of pink. Starting things off is the Fairytale Era. The films in this era were all based on pre-existing media, including books and ballets. Rather than jumping straight into the story, each film is used as a tool to illustrate a story that Barbie is telling. The titles of these films all make the distinction that Barbie is starring as a character in a film, and it is not Barbie playing herself. Barbie and the Nutcracker, based on both the story and the ballet, was released in 2001. To give you a better idea of how long ago that was, I have this on VHS. The movie starts with Barbie and Kelly doing ballet, and then Barbie tells the story. It's been a long time since I've seen this, so I forgot how much actual dancing was in it. To create the realistic-looking dancing, they used motion capture and teamed up with dancers from the New York City Ballet and choreographer Peter Martins. In my opinion, the animation was honestly really good by 2001 standards. There were a few awkward things, like the boulder creature didn't age very well, but it mostly still holds up. For landscape shots, they did this sort of painted-looking background, which I personally prefer over a crunchy-looking 3D rendering. Most of the focus for the animation seems to have gone into the dancing, which I think was time well spent. A really fun piece of trivia is that, according to the Barbie movie wiki, the Nutcracker makes an appearance in almost every Barbie movie. I only noticed a few on my own before learning this, but it's a fun Easter egg to keep an eye out for during future rewatches. We have a lot of movies to get through, so to speed things up, I've developed a rating system based on nothing but my own personal feelings. I've watched this movie way too many times to give it anything less than 5 stars. Barbie as Rapunzel. This time, Barbie and Kelly are painting when the story begins. This is supposedly an adaptation of the classic Rapunzel story, but they took so many creative liberties that it was basically an original story. The only time Rapunzel uses her hair, like in the original story, is during a dream sequence. In fact, her hair plays a very minimal role in the story. She didn't even use it during a scene where it literally would have made sense to do so. What's interesting is that both this and Disney's version of Rapunzel had Rapunzel be a kidnapped princess who loves to paint, even though neither of those details are in the original story. Barbie did it first, though. Just saying. Fun fact, Rapunzel's paintings that are featured throughout the movie were done by an actual artist named Amanda Dunbar, who was only 19 at the time. Barbie as Rapunzel had a lot of firsts that would soon become staples for the series. It was the first movie to have an original song written for it, and it was the first movie to have a quote at the end of the credits. Moving forward, nearly every Barbie movie would have some sort of inspirational quote at the end of the end credits that was usually taken directly from the movie. This was also the first movie to air on Nickelodeon, nearly 2 months after its initial release. For the next 15 years, almost every Barbie movie would make its television debut on Nickelodeon. This is a solid movie, although at the end it does kind of gloss over the atrocities committed by Rapunzel's dad. 4 stars. Barbie of Swan Lake is, of course, based on the Swan Lake Ballet. This time, Barbie is Kelly's counselor at summer camp. The creative team once again partnered with Peter Martins and the New York City Ballet for the dance sequences. The first 3 Barbie movies were all directed by Owen Hurley, who would return a decade later to direct one more Barbie movie. As the Barbie movies became more popular, Mattel would increase the number of movies that were being released each year. This led to the development of a rotating team of writers and directors, allowing them to work on multiple projects at once. The movies also feature a lot of recurring voice actors. In Barbie of Swan Lake, the Fairy Queen and Odette's older sister had the same voice actress. Having one person voice multiple characters is often done to save time and money, but I like to think this was done on purpose. This way, Odette's sister, who constantly encouraged her to go on adventures, was mirrored by the person who served as her guide while she went on the biggest adventure of her life. I would argue that this is the darkest of the Barbie movies because we straight up see Daniel and Odette die on screen when Rothbart attacks them. The power of their love brings them back to life, which apparently is not how the original story goes, but I was still traumatized by it. 3 stars. Barbie as the Princess and the Pauper is a gender-bent adaptation of The Prince and the Pauper by Mark Twain. While there wasn't an intro scene with Barbie and Kelly this time, the movie does start with a voiceover of Barbie telling the story, similar to a fairy tale. This was the first Barbie musical, and wow did they knock it out of the park. In my opinion, this easily could have been made into a stage play, and I'm a little surprised they didn't try. Kelly Sheridan, Barbie's voice actress, plays both Annalise and Erica, but I was shocked to find out she is not the singing voice for either character. I was even more surprised to learn that they had 2 different singing voices. So Barbie actually has 3 different voice actors in this movie, but they all matched up really well. This was the first time that the animals couldn't speak with humans, though they were still a major part of the story. This was also the first Barbie movie to have a blooper reel, which is something that would periodically be included on the DVDs. Princess and the Pauper is often called the GOAT, and for good reason. I'd argue this is the funniest of all the Barbie movies, in no small part because of Martin Short giving his absolute all as Preminger. I also felt like Annalise and Erica were much more developed characters than the heroines of the previous Barbie movies. 5 stars. Many risks were taken with The Princess and the Pauper, but it was ultimately still an adaptation, making it the last film before the start of the experimental era. Nearly every film in this era was a completely original story, and they would introduce a lot of firsts for the franchise as the team behind the movies experimented with new ideas. Beginning with Barbie Fairytopia, which was the first original Barbie movie. So I didn't know this, but the Barbie Fairytopia dolls existed before the movie did, and they served as the inspiration for it. The dolls debuted in 2003, and the movie came out in 2005. Fairytopia was the first Barbie movie to premiere on Nickelodeon before being released on DVD. This would be the norm for the next 2 years. Now, there are hints at a romance with Prince Nalu, like there's definitely flirting happening, but nothing happens beyond that, making this the first movie without a love interest. One thing that never made sense to me with this movie is, how come Bibble wasn't affected by the flying sickness? Yes, he flies low most of the time to be with Alina, but he still would have been inhaling it, and his tiny body should have been affected much sooner than Hugh's was. Also, did anyone else think these gnomes were going to be a trap? I was convinced that they were going to be the fungi in disguise. This movie really allowed the team at Mattel to showcase their creativity, and it opened up a new world of possibilities for the Barbie movies that wasn't tied to existing stories. 4 stars. Barbie and the Magic of Pegasus is the first and only Barbie movie to be released in 3D. This was when 3D was a massive fad. Unfortunately, it kind of prevents the animation in this movie from aging very well, because there are several scenes that were clearly animated for the sole purpose of being in 3D, which makes it harder to enjoy when you're watching it in 2D. I also noticed this bizarre animation glitch where Annika would suddenly be wearing red lipstick for some reason before switching back to pink. But it did have some pretty incredible ice skating animation. If you look at the villagers in Annika's kingdom, you'll notice that almost every man is Prince Nalu. Reusing character designs is common in these types of movies to save on animation, but Nalu has such a distinct look, and they used it for literally every man in the village, so I found it a little distracting. This is technically the first movie without a royal love interest. Julian in Princess and the Pauper was the first love interest to not be a prince, but Erica's love interest was a king, so it still had royalty. This is also one of the few movies where Barbie's main color isn't pink. Instead, purple is the primary color seen throughout the movie. Did you know that the end credits song Hope Has Wings was recorded by Brie Larson? As in Captain Marvel Brie Larson? I didn't even know she sang! Overall, this movie's fine. The reveal that Wenlock is just some random perv is both hilarious and disappointing. 3 stars. Barbie Mermaidia was the first Barbie movie to be a sequel, and in my opinion, it's the best of the Fairytopia trilogy. This was the last Barbie movie to be released on VHS in addition to DVD. Every time I watch this, I notice a few moments that make me think this was originally going to be another 3D movie, but thankfully it isn't. Alina teams up with Nori, which is a very appropriate name because girl is salty. People love an enemies to lovers story, but I personally am a sucker for a good enemies to friends story, and this was a great one. I do feel slightly gaslit with them trying to act like there was never anything between Alina and Nalu, but I like the fact that they stuck to her being a character without a love interest. I love this movie. It's one of my favorites. 5 stars. The Barbie Diaries was the first movie where Barbie starred as herself, and the first movie to completely take place in the modern day. There are only a handful of Barbie movies that don't have any animals, and this was the first one. The Barbie Diaries has a very distinct animation style compared to the other movies. The reason for this is because it was the only movie produced by Curious Pictures. This is one of only 6 Barbie movies that weren't produced by Canadian company Mainframe Studios. My speculation is that they wanted to test out a new animation style because one of the common criticisms for Barbie's animation was how stiff the hair was, which was definitely something they fixed in this movie. It also might have been done to save time because 2006 was the first year that 3 Barbie movies were released. Personally, I've never been bothered by the animation style. I think the change was fitting because this was the first time Barbie would be playing herself in the real world, and for a long time it would be the only one. Normally, Barbie's singing voice has a sort of Disney princess type of quality to it, but to give her a more modern rocker type of sound, they had singer Sky Sweetnam be Barbie's singing voice in this movie, although her voice would not appear on the official soundtrack. One of my all-time favorite fun facts to tell people is that Kesha, yes, that Kesha, sang the song Invisible from this soundtrack. I believe they only played the instrumental of this song during the movie, but you can hear the full version on the High School Mystery PC game that came out with this movie, which I was freaking obsessed with. If I had to choose a favorite Barbie movie, I think it would be this one. 5 stars. Barbie and the 12 Dancing Princesses. So this is the only film from the experimental era that wasn't an original story. However, I would still say it was experimental in terms of ambition because it had 12 princesses in almost every scene of the movie, so they had to animate a lot more characters than usual. This is technically based on the 12 Dancing Princesses fairy tale, but I would say it's more inspired by it. The original story is actually pretty sexist. It has a man as the main character, and the princesses are portrayed as villains for trying to escape their controlling father. I think Barbie's version is much better. The ballet dancing in this movie was once again created using motion capture and partnering with the New York City Ballet. The score for this movie goes so hard, especially the main theme when they hit that oh, it's so good. Rewatching the older Barbie movies in particular made me realize that they fostered an appreciation for classical music, which isn't common in children's media. This movie got so many things right. A despicable villain, a well-developed love interest, and the princesses felt unique from one another despite having very little time to showcase their personalities. 5 stars. Barbie Fairytopia Magic of the Rainbow was the 3rd Fairytopia movie, making Fairytopia the first Barbie movie trilogy. So this might be a hot take, but I've never really liked this movie. The pacing is really slow, and there's a bizarre amount of exposition for a movie that's a 3rd installment in a series. And despite all of that exposition, they never explain why Alina can use magic now, even though we'd previously only seen the Guardian Fairies use it. It also commits one of my biggest pet peeves in sequels, which is when a character like Alina, who has previously been established as clever and capable, is now an idiot who's extremely easy to fool because it's needed for the plot. They introduce a bunch of new characters in this movie who all have gorgeous character designs, but we spend very little time getting to know them. To me, this was the first Barbie movie that felt like its sole purpose was to sell toys. It also doesn't help that it was released after 3 of my favorite Barbie movies. Like, I know you can do better, 'cause I've seen it. 2 stars. Barbie as the Island Princess was the 2nd Barbie musical. It's technically an original story, but you can definitely see some inspiration from stories like Tarzan and The Little Mermaid. Real talk, Ro should have had a tan. She's literally been living outside her whole life, yet she's somehow paler than Prince Antonio. I don't get why they made that choice because it's not like Barbie hasn't had a tan before. This would be the last movie where Barbie gets married, though it would not be the last movie to feature a wedding. At the wedding, you can see a cameo by several of the sisters from the 12 Dancing Princesses. I tell you, I'm physically incapable of watching the scene where Ro reunites with her mom without crying. Like, this girl couldn't even remember her own name, but she remembered the lullaby that her mom wrote for her. That's so beautiful. Ugh, I'm tearing up now just talking about it. 5 stars. Barbie Mariposa and Her Butterfly Fairy Friends is a spin-off of the Fairytopia movies. This is the first movie where Barbie does not play the titular character. Instead, she returns as Alina, telling Mariposa's story to Bibble, which also makes it the first movie since the Fairytale Era to be told in the form of a story rather than a standalone. Fun fact, Mariposa means butterfly in Spanish, which is most likely why they chose to give the aristocracy in this movie Spanish accents. Mariposa was voiced by Chiara Zani, who previously voiced Dahlia, Nori, Raquel, and Adeline. Mariposa is another one of my faves. Every character is so well developed, and even though this doesn't star Barbie, I feel like it's a great movie to show someone for their first Barbie movie. 5 stars. Barbie and the Diamond Castle was the first movie to feature Teresa, the first movie to feature Stacy, and the first movie where Barbie has a pet dog, breaking her long-standing streak as a cat lady. It's also the first movie since Swan Lake to take place in 2 different time periods. This was the last Barbie movie to air on Nickelodeon before its DVD release. Moving forward, all TV premieres would happen after the DVD had come out. During the scene where Alexa is possessed, there's an animation error where you can see her wearing the heart necklace that protects her from the spell before Liana gives it back to her. The love interests in this movie kinda give me the ick. They're just 2 sleazy guys with British accents, and I feel like they detract from the movie's focus on friendship. I'm pretty much convinced the only reason they were added was to prevent people from seeing Liana and Alexa as a couple, as if that was going to stop anyone. This was the 3rd Barbie musical with yet another great soundtrack. I think Two Voices, One Song is one of the best Barbie movie songs, and I will not hear arguments to the contrary. Unfortunately, watching it back, I realized I don't like the actual movie as much as I like the soundtrack. 3 stars. Barbie and the Diamond Castle had very similar vibes to the Fairytale Era, and so did all of the movies that were released over the next 2 years. We are now entering the New Classics Era. This is the shortest of all the eras, but during it, the Barbie movies went back to their original formula of being based on existing classic stories. Barbie and A Christmas Carol is, of course, based on the classic novel by Charles Dickens. It sees the return of the format where Barbie tells a story to Kelly. It was also the first movie to feature Nikki, who unfortunately doesn't make that many appearances in the Barbie movies. The animation for the Barbie movies had been slowly changing and improving over time, and I think this movie really showcases it. There are details like clothes rustling and hair bouncing, which weren't very present in the early movies. And having characters be transparent showed a new level of skills. Fun fact, Eden's cat Chuzzlewit is named after another Charles Dickens book, The Life and Adventures of Martin Chuzzlewit. I didn't appreciate this movie enough as a kid because I'd already seen several interpretations of A Christmas Carol, but watching this back, I actually think it's a little underrated. I loved a lot of the choices they made, and I think it stands out from other adaptations. 5 stars. Barbie Presents Thumbelina is perhaps the most forgotten Barbie movie, although it makes sense considering Barbie is barely in it. For the last time in these movies, Barbie is telling the story to a kid, but this time it's a group of kids, and it's the first time that Barbie tells a story to a non-family member. Since the magic in the Barbie Diaries is open to interpretation, I consider this the first fantasy story to take place in the modern day. Thumbelina isn't one of my faves, but it's a cute movie. It had a slightly childish quality compared to a lot of the other movies, but I think that was partially because the characters were younger than usual. I did love how it established McKenna's parents as being loving towards her despite being workaholics because it made their change of heart more believable. And honestly, I'm never going to be mad at a movie that encourages people to look after the environment. 3 stars. We finish off this era with Barbie and the Three Musketeers. This was the last Barbie movie to take place entirely in the past. There are actually a ton of references to the original Three Musketeers book in this movie, so I'm not going to go over all of them, but I do still have a fun fact for you. Philippe, the villain of this movie, is played by Tim Curry, who also played the Mouse King in Barbie and the Nutcracker, which is extra funny because in both movies, he plays a regent that tries to usurp the throne by getting rid of the prince. Tim Curry also played the villain in the 1993 live-action Three Musketeers movie. So if you're ever in need of an evil regent, Tim Curry's your man. During the scene where the girls are prepping for the ball, there's this really awkward animation error where Renee is just suddenly zapped of all of her melanin. This has always bothered me for several reasons, but I'm genuinely so confused how something like this happens. 'Cause she's wearing the correct clothes, so they didn't accidentally put in a different character. But that aside, this is another one of my favorite movies. I love a good mystery. Philippe had such a great villain reveal too. This is definitely the most mature of the Barbie movies, considering it revolves around an assassination plot, but I still think Swan Lake is the darkest because I found it the most traumatizing. If I could change one thing, it would be the prince as a love interest. You can't give me princes like Carlos and Derek and then think I'm going to be happy with this. He and Corinne do have cute moments, but I never forgave him for the sexist comment he made right after she literally saved his life, and I don't think she should have either. The Barbie movies always eat when they do a gender-bent adaptation. 5 stars. In 2010, Mattel would switch things up by beginning the Barbie Cinematic Universe era. Instead of being one-off stories, this era established an official universe where all of the Barbie movies live. In this canon, Barbie is an actress, and it's implied that she was acting in all of the movies that she didn't star as herself in. So it's a little meta, because the movies now exist in both our universe and hers. As I mentioned earlier, the Barbie movies have a rotating team of writers and directors. But this era was the only time in Barbie movie history where a single writer wrote 6 movies in a row. All of the movies in this era were written by Elise Allen, who had been part of the rotating writing team since 2005. Notably, she also wrote all of the Fairytopia movies. Thematically, there is a noticeable shift towards sympathetic villains and redemption arcs. The movies would also begin to decenter romance in a way that most of the older movies hadn't. Lastly, this era had a fairly significant change in animation style. The hair, skin, and eyebrows had more texture, Barbie's face had a thinner shape, and her eyes looked larger. Barbie also appears to be wearing less makeup than in the older movies. My theory is that all of this was done to make her look younger, because even though we've been told in each movie that she's a teenager, I've always felt like she looked like she was in her 20s. You can see these animation changes in Barbie in A Mermaid Tale. Look at Barbie doing TikTok dances before it was cool. Merlia is the first modern-day princess and the first princess to not have a love interest. While this isn't the first fantasy movie to take place in the modern day, it is the first time that the fantasy realm mimicked the modern world, with references to things like Sephora and the Pufferazzi. I think this does a great job at modernizing the Barbie movies while still having the fantasy elements that we all know and love them for. Also, not to be dramatic, but I would die for snouts. 5 stars. Barbie: A Fashion Fairy Tale is what really establishes the Barbie Cinematic Universe, or the BCU, if you will. This is the movie that explains the new canon, and it even has references to the last 2 Barbie movies. There's a poster for Barbie in A Mermaid Tale in Barbie's trailer, and later in the movie, Barbie talks about her time filming The Three Musketeers. This is the first movie where Ken plays himself, and poor thing is going through it. He just endures endless suffering. It's also the first movie without Kelly Sheridan as the voice of Barbie. She would return in the future, but for the next 3 movies, Barbie would be voiced by Diana Carina. A Fashion Fairy Tale would also introduce these new stylized transitions between scenes that had previously only been done in the Barbie Diaries. These transitions would only be used for the next 2 movies before being phased back out. Finally, this was the first Barbie movie where the main villain gets a redemption at the end. Was it deserved? Not really, but I appreciate the movies starting to show a bit more nuance with their antagonists. If you give me a movie about fashion, especially sparkly fashion, chances are I'm going to like it. 5 stars. Barbie: A Fairy Secret. According to the Barbie movie wiki, the filmmakers claim that this isn't a sequel to Barbie: A Fashion Fairy Tale, but no source was cited, so as far as I'm concerned, it is a sequel because it contains several references to it, and it just straight up makes more sense if you've seen it. In A Fairy Secret, we continue to see more suffering for poor Ken. What did this sweet man do to deserve the worst luck in the universe? Again, I love a good enemies to friends story, but it didn't land as well in this one for me. We learn that the reason why Raquel is mean to Barbie and actively tries to ruin her life is because she's jealous of Barbie and thought she didn't like her. They frame it as though Barbie didn't try hard enough to befriend Raquel when she moved to Malibu, as if that's somehow her responsibility. This is very much a one-sided beef, and I don't appreciate them trying to act like Raquel and Barbie played equal parts in it. But I did like how Graciela and Crystal mirrored Barbie and Raquel. That was a nice touch. The world building in this kinda just felt like a fairy version of Barbie in A Mermaid Tale, so it wasn't very interesting. It's not necessarily a bad movie, but it's not super entertaining to rewatch. 2 stars. Barbie: Princess Charm School. Merlia may have been the first princess in the modern day, but Blair was the first human princess in the modern world. Princess Charm School is a great movie, but I'm pretty sure it has more animation errors than any other Barbie movie. During the fire alarm scene, there's this really weird moment where it just straight up looks like they didn't do the final rendering for the animation. And shortly before that, you can see a student walking on the balcony before just straight up disappearing into thin air. One possible explanation for this is that Delancey was apparently supposed to be in Isla's place, but they decided to change the character designs. Now, this isn't confirmed anywhere, but it would make a lot of sense because a lot of promotional materials show Delancey in places where it would make more sense to show Isla, including the official movie poster where Delancey appears to be wearing Isla's outfit. The back of the DVD case also apparently says Blair works with Hadley and Delancey instead of Hadley and Isla. This being a last-minute change would also explain why Isla tragically never had a doll for this movie. Even though it's riddled with animation errors, this is still a great movie, which is a testament to how strong the writing is. Delancey easily has the best redemption arc out of any former villain. 5 stars. Barbie: A Perfect Christmas is the first movie with Skipper, meaning all of the sisters have now made their on-screen debut. It's also the first movie since Mattel changed Kelly's name to Chelsea. There's another one-off change in animation style for this movie because it was animated by Technicolor. I'm gonna be so honest, I genuinely forgot this movie existed. It's such a snooze to get through. This is the first Barbie movie without a villain, which unfortunately turned it into a movie without much of a plot. It mostly consists of Chelsea being the most annoying child ever. This is supposed to be a musical, but it seems to forget that fact about halfway through the movie. My suspicion is that the only reason it was made into a musical was to pad out the runtime, because without the songs, this easily could have been cut down to a half-hour TV special. I do like the song A Perfect Christmas at the end, but it reminds me a lot of I'm Only Me When I'm With You by Taylor Swift, so that's probably the reason why. 1 star. After a string of original stories, the movies would proceed to do the exact opposite, ushering in the sequel era. For the next 2 years, every Barbie movie would either be a sequel or contain significant references to an already existing Barbie movie. Starting with Barbie in A Mermaid Tale 2. This was the last film in Elise Allen's run as the sole writer of these movies, but it would not be the last one written by her. I think Barbie in A Mermaid Tale was perfectly set up for a sequel, and since it was a very popular movie, this made sense. After fan backlash, Mattel brought back Kelly Sheridan to reprise her role as Barbie for the foreseeable future. The plot of this kind of feels like a better version of Magic of the Rainbow. I am confused why Merlia's necklace would work on a normal person, though. I feel like it takes away from Merlia's unique identity as a child of both land and sea. I was disappointed that they didn't bring back Kayla and Xylee, considering most of the movie takes place in Australia, where they're from. Like, I kept waiting for them to appear, and it never happened. Kylie gets a great redemption, but the end of the movie has always irritated me. Kylie only wins the competition because Merlia throws it in favor of spinning Marilia, which is something she could do at literally any time. Since all of this started because of Kylie feeling inferior to Merlia, it would have been a better full circle moment if she'd actually beaten her, especially because we see her do a cool trick that shows she's improved and could have won on her own. 3 stars. Barbie, the Princess and the Pop Star. Hey, you know how pretty much everyone loves The Princess and the Pauper? How would you like a worse version of it that completely misses the point? The Princess and the Pop Star is supposedly another adaptation of The Prince and the Pauper, except it misses the whole point of the book. One of the central themes is supposed to be wealth inequality. One person lives in excess while the other lives in poverty. Here, it's just 2 rich people switching places. Kira is established as someone who works hard but misses when her career was just about being creative. Tori, on the other hand, is a spoiled princess who doesn't take any of her responsibilities seriously. They throw in one little scene where she learns about poverty in her kingdom, but at the party earlier in the movie, we hear people talking about the drought, which implies that she probably would have known about these issues if she took her job even remotely seriously. Just like the original, this movie is a musical, but half of the songs are remakes. There's Girls Just Wanna Have Fun, Perfect Day, and in case you weren't sure if this was supposed to be a remake, they made a new version of To Be a Princess. The magic in this movie also feels so random and out of place. Why do they have a magic hairbrush and microphone? Why, because the plot demands it, of course. I know I just ripped into this movie, but despite all of the issues it has, it is really entertaining to watch. However, that doesn't change the fact that it's ultimately a soulless remake of a better movie. 3 stars. Barbie in the Pink Shoes is a loose adaptation of The Red Shoes by Hans Christian Andersen, which, like most fairy tales, is much darker than the version we see here. While the similarities are sparse, it would technically be the last Barbie movie to be an adaptation of an existing story. It would also be the last movie to center around ballet, but ballet would reappear in the movies about a decade later. It's the only one of the 4 ballet movies to not be choreographed by Peter Martins. So you might be thinking, how is this a sequel? It technically isn't, but about a third of the movie is another retelling of Swan Lake, so it still calls back to the earlier movies. Speaking of Swan Lake, this movie saw the one-off return of Owen Hurley, who directed the first 3 Barbie movies. Barbie in the Pink Shoes was the first Barbie movie to be released on Blu-ray. It was the second film to be animated by Technicolor, although the change in animation is much less noticeable. The dancing in this movie is beautiful, and it has some really funny, self-aware jokes, but outside of that, it's not super memorable. Instead of an animal, Haley is supposed to be the comedic relief, but she isn't funny. And I get this is supposed to be about embracing your own creativity, but I don't get why Kristen does professional ballet in the first place when she clearly wants to do her own thing. Like, it's actually really disrespectful to change someone else's choreography in the middle of a show. Meh, 2 stars. Barbie, Mariposa, and the Fairy Princess is supposed to be a sequel to Barbie Mariposa, but it has almost nothing to do with the original story. For some reason, Mariposa is voiced by Kelly Sheridan in this, which implies that Barbie is now playing Mariposa, I think. Mariposa's original voice actress Kiara Zani returns to play Erica in Rockin' Royals, so I have no idea why they made this choice, especially because all of the other returning characters were played by their original voice actors. This was the last film to be written by Elise Allen, who wrote a grand total of 14 Barbie movies. She's the only Barbie movie writer to reach double digits in writing credits, so major props to her. Unfortunately, this wasn't a great one for her to go out on. Mariposa is one of my all-time favorite Barbie movies, and I've seen it over 20 times, so I had a lot of mostly negative thoughts about this one. First of all, none of the characters feel like themselves. Willa is made out to be incompetent, even though the last movie established her as being very reliable and hardworking. Mariposa's issue in the first movie was that she lacked confidence, but now her biggest issue is that she's clumsy, which is something we've never seen before. Maybe the new voice threw me off a bit, but this felt like a completely new character. Despite their minimal interactions in the first movie, I think Prince Carlos is such a good love interest, and I was hoping to see his relationship with Mariposa develop more. Instead, I got to waste about 20 minutes watching 2 puffballs fall in love, who for some reason now sound like the Tasmanian devil. We cap things off with a random and utterly forgettable villain, even though the last movie ended with Henna swearing revenge, meaning her returning as a villain would have made sense. I think this could have worked as a standalone, but even then, it's not that great of a movie. So the fact that they're trying to tell me that this is a sequel to one of my favorite movies made it impossible for me to enjoy. 1 star. Barbie and her sisters in a ponytail. Oh, my oasis in the desert! To be honest, I was dreading watching this after how bad A Perfect Christmas was, but I was pleasantly surprised. This was the first film to be animated by ARC Productions, who also worked on Barbie Life in the Dreamhouse. Something I had noticed in the movies from A Perfect Christmas onward was an increase in scenes where nothing really happens. There were so many scenes in the movies without dialogue that didn't seem to serve a purpose. Not that a scene needs dialogue to be interesting or important, but compare the race between Alina and Nori in Mermaidia with the snowball fight in A Perfect Christmas, and you'll understand what I mean. This, however, was a breath of fresh air. The animation looked great, it was an interesting watch, every character had their own storyline, and it fixed the pacing issues. I would gladly watch this again. 5 stars. Okay, no more nostalgia bait. We're moving on to the Princess Era. Yes, Barbie has played a princess plenty of times, but for the next 4 movies in a row, she would star as an original princess. Notably, all of the princesses in these movies are princesses by birthright, rather than through marriage. Barbie the Pearl Princess is the 4th Barbie movie about mermaids, but it is the first and only one to take place entirely underwater. Near the end of the movie, there's an Easter egg where you can see the 4 mermaid ambassadors from A Mermaid Tale 2 on the wall in the castle. This is a great movie, and I really like how they wrote Aunt Scylla as such a complex character. Though this did kind of feel like I was watching a cross between Princess Charm School and A Mermaid Tale, so it loses points for originality. 4 stars. Barbie and the Secret Door was the first Barbie movie to be directed by a woman, Karen J. Lloyd, which feels kind of insane to say because we are almost 30 movies in. I went into this movie not knowing anything about it, and I was definitely not expecting it to be another musical. But once again, it seems to forget that fact about halfway through the movie. And they sing 3 different versions of the same song with an extremely repetitive chorus that drove me nuts. First, it's If I Had Magic, then it's I've Got Magic, then it's We've Got Magic. I really need y'all to stop making musicals if you're only gonna write like 3 songs for it. Either commit to it or don't do it at all. This movie felt like a watered-down mix of The Chronicles of Narnia and Alice in Wonderland. The unhinged villain was hilarious, but overall, it's not a very interesting movie. They created an interesting world, but we don't get to explore it very much. 2 stars. Barbie and Princess Power is Barbie's first traditional superhero movie. There's a subtle animation change for this film that mimics the style of a comic book, which I thought was a really cute detail. It has some really cool action sequences, especially the scene where she saves a guy from a burning building. At first, I didn't understand the choice to have Cara be a princess for this story, but then I remembered this was during the time period where princesses were being criticized for being too passive, so this was most likely done in response to that. In fact, that may have influenced the start of the Princess Era as a whole. I wish they would have explained how Cara has 2 tech-savvy friends that seem to be commoners. It felt a little random for a sheltered princess to know them, and their existence just felt a little too convenient. But I think this checks all the boxes for a good superhero movie. 4 stars. Barbie and Rockin' Royals is the last Barbie movie to have Barbie star as another character. She was given another new face design, which was most likely done to more closely resemble the new Millie face sculpt that the dolls have had since 2013. I think it looked pretty accurate, but for some reason, this would be the only movie to use this design for Barbie. Rockin' Royals contains several references to previous Barbie movies, including a wig that looks like Malusha's hair in The Secret Door, a portrait of the headmaster from Princess Charm School, and Princess Courtney describes pulling the same prank that Princess Tori pulled in The Princess and the Pauper. There are also a lot of reused character names in this movie. This is the second time that characters named Raina, Erica, Courtney, and Genevieve have appeared in one of these movies. To save time here, I'm gonna do a breakdown of all of the repeated character names in these movies over on my Instagram, but this is something that happened bizarrely frequently. There's hundreds of thousands of names in the world to choose from, and yet somehow there's over 10 instances of names being reused for different characters in these movies, which is made even weirder by the fact that Mattel has filed trademarks for character names that they never ended up using. But back to Rockin' Royals. I would describe this as a redo of The Princess and the Pauper crossed with Camp Rock 2, which doesn't sound like it would be good, but it actually worked great. After several disappointing musicals, this was a redemption with another great soundtrack. My only complaint is the addition of Chekhov's magic scepter. For some reason, being a princess also makes you a wizard in this universe, but the only significant role it plays is something that could have easily been done with the push of a button. It just felt random and out of place. I saw this for the first time during the pandemic, and I remember really liking it then, and I still really like it now. 5 stars. All of the movies from the Princess Era appear to take place during the modern day, which is a theme that would continue throughout the modern era. From here on out, Barbie stars as herself in each movie, though not every movie takes place within the same universe. This era featured multiple changes in animation style that I'm personally not a big fan of. They succeeded in making Barbie look more like a teenager, but she straight up does not look like the dolls that were being released for these movies. Barbie and Her Sisters in the Great Puppy Adventure is the first movie to use a new animation style, though it looks slightly different from the ones that follow because it was once again done by ARC Productions. For some reason, they animated all of their teeth, which looked a bit creepy. This would be the last movie to star Kelly Sheridan as Barbie. For real this time. Barbie and her sisters spend the summer with their grandma in their hometown of Willows, Wisconsin, establishing an official backstory for Barbie. Barbie names her new puppy Taffy, which is also the name of Barbie's dog in the Life in the Dreamhouse series. This movie is basically just Barbie's version of the Goonies, and it's hard to go wrong with that. Who doesn't love a treasure hunt? 4 stars. Barbie Spy Squad was the first movie to feature Barbie's new friend Renee, who is now a staple in the Barbie universe. It also starred Teresa, sporting a brand new look and a completely different personality. BCU era Teresa was on the ditzy side, but now she's a tech genius. So a complete 180. This marked the beginning of Erica Lindbeck's run as Barbie. She was only 23 at the time she was cast, so my educated guess is that Mattel wanted Barbie to sound younger. Every film from here to Barbie Dolphin Magic would also have the same end quote at the end of the credits. This is our story, what's yours? Boring! When the girls are touring the spy agency for the first time, there's a single shot that has so many Easter eggs in it. You can see outfits from The Secret Door, Princess Power, Mariposa, Rockin' Royals, and another cameo from our friend the Nutcracker. I'm a big fan of Totally Spies, so of course I was all for this. The girls are honestly pretty incompetent spies though, despite nailing their training, but then they suddenly pull it together at the end. I wish we would have seen a bit more of their progress so that the ending felt more deserved. I also think this was perfectly set up for a sequel that would unfortunately never happen. 4 stars. Barbie Starlight Adventure is Barbie's first sci-fi movie. It's the first and only movie to take place in the future, and the last one to take place in a time period that isn't the present. The main character is named Barbie, but it's clearly not meant to take place in the same universe as the other movies where Barbie played herself. This was the last film animated by ARC Productions, and therefore the last film done by a company other than Mainframe Studios. This was another one that I watched for the first time during the pandemic, and I liked it more on the second watch. However, I got the sense that it had too many ideas, which resulted in stuff getting cut out. Like, there's one scene where they emphasize the pink streak in Barbie's hair returning, even though they never pointed out that it disappeared in the first place, or why. Then she gets an additional purple streak at the end, which no one addresses either. Prince Leo started out as an interesting character, but then his whole personality gets reduced to liking food. I don't know why they thought that would be a super funny running joke, cause it wasn't. This was a good attempt at sci-fi, but it's majorly weakened by Barbie's dialogue. So many of her lines are basically just her narrating her every thought, which kept taking me out of the story. 3 stars. Barbie and Her Sisters in a Puppy Chase was the last film written by Amy Wolfram, who was the last remaining writer to have worked on the Barbie movies during the first decade. It was also the last film directed by William Lau, who'd been part of the rotating director team since The Princess and the Pauper. To date, this is the last movie to feature talking animals, both to each other and to humans. I'm so serious when I say this entire movie could have been a 5-minute webisode. I'm not even sure what the takeaway was supposed to be. Chelsea spends the whole movie worrying about her dance competition, but at no point do we see her trying to rehearse, even though she keeps saying that's what she needs to do. They then have her show up late to said competition, only to do a horrible job, but then she gets saved by the animals and her sisters joining her on stage, even though this was supposed to be an individual dance competition, and somehow she ends up winning. What's the moral of the story? If you're a cute blonde child, you can break rules and not work hard, but still end up on top? 1 star. Barbie Video Game Hero was the last film to air on Nickelodeon and the last film to have a physical release. Ironically, a video game was not released as part of the merchandise for it. This is the only Barbie movie to use 4 different animation styles, which was a pretty cool thing to see. Outside of that, I've never heard a positive thing about this movie, and I thought, surely people are exaggerating, but no, it's pretty bad. I'm so confused about who this movie was for, because obviously they wanted it to appeal to video game fans, but then it explains things like NPCs and coding as though the people watching have never played a video game before. But the worst detail by far is the boss battle at the end, which was literally just an ad for Just Dance. This was the first and only time there was in-movie advertising for a non-Barbie product, which, aside from being morally questionable, was very poorly done. 1 star. Now we enter what is probably the most distinct of all the eras, the Dreamhouse Era. Beginning in 2017, all Barbie movies started premiering on Netflix. From here onwards, every movie takes place in the same universe as the Netflix series Barbie Dreamhouse Adventures. With the exception of the Barbie and Her Sisters movies, pretty much everything from the previously established canon has been erased. Barbie is now just a normal high school girl who's trying to be a successful vlogger. She and Ken have feelings for each other, but they aren't dating, and Barbie actually has parents now. The animation style is similar to that of Barbie Video Game Hero when she was in the real world, except Teresa, once again, looks and acts completely different. The Dreamhouse Era features an almost entirely new team of writers and directors. Aside from having to follow the Dreamhouse Adventures canon, I noticed all of the new movies seem to have a specific set of parameters they must follow. Nearly every movie clocks in at just over an hour, whereas the runtime for Barbie movies previously ranged from 70 to 90 minutes on average. Not every movie is a musical, but they all feature at least one scene where a character bursts into song. Obviously, it makes more sense for the ones that are musicals, but they're clearly being required to meet some type of quota. This era has a very confusing start because it begins with Barbie Dolphin Magic, which premiered a year before the Dreamhouse Adventures series did. So it follows this new canon, but at the time of its premiere, no one would have known that. I was very confused when Barbie referred to Ken as her friend. Like, I just watched y'all fall in love across 20 different universes and you're telling me that meant nothing? What's interesting about this new universe, though, is that it does canonically still have magic. As for the movie itself, it has a really strong start, but after the first 20 minutes, the plot just drags on with pointless scenes, followed by a non-stop cycle of new conflict that gets resolved 5 minutes later. There also weren't any detailed subplots, which normally would have helped with this problem. The biggest obstacle in this story is literally getting a gate open. There were some good moments, but not enough to make me want to watch this again. 1 star. So, quick history lesson. After the release of Barbie Dolphin Magic, there was a 3-year break before the next Barbie movie was released, which is the longest hiatus the film series has ever had. I went over this in more detail in my recent Ever After High video, but in 2017, Mattel was struggling financially, which resulted in them bringing in a new CEO who decided to have the company put most of its focus into digital content for its biggest brands. This resulted in the cancellation of Ever After High, Monster High, and a temporary hiatus for the Barbie movies, while they instead focused on the new Dreamhouse Adventures show. In 2020, the movies would return with Barbie Princess Adventure. This was the first movie to feature America Young as the voice of Barbie, who has voiced Barbie since the start of the Dreamhouse Adventures series. In a really cute send-off, they had Erica Lindbeck voice Amelia, the princess that looks identical to Barbie. This was the last film to have an end quote at the end of the credits, though it saw the return of an original quote instead of the generic one. Up until this point, the only movies without ending quotes were Barbie and the Nutcracker, the Barbie Diaries, and Barbie and her sisters in The Great Puppy Adventure. Barbie Princess Adventure is yet another story where a commoner trades places with a princess, and frankly, I'm just tired of this plot device. Can't Barbie trade places with literally any other type of character? Especially because the princess in this is basically just reduced to being an influencer, so I don't see why she couldn't trade places with a different type of celebrity. This one was an actual musical, and I think it held up well because the songs actually served a narrative purpose. I also think this had one of the best villain reveals in all of the Barbie movies. One thing that was really bizarre to me was that Barbie and her friends literally dressed like 5-year-olds. I get that that's Barbie's target age group, but this is the only movie where that happens, and it was actually distracting, because what do you mean the queen is wearing sneakers and a tank dress to her coronation? I liked this movie more than I thought I would, but I did find it a little hard to get into at first because I haven't seen the Dreamhouse Adventures series, and it featured like every character from it, even though half of them weren't relevant to the plot. So I might have given this 4 stars if I'd seen the show, but judging it on its own, I give it 3 stars. Barbie and Chelsea: The Lost Birthday mostly centers around Chelsea, which I didn't think I was gonna like, but I was pleasantly surprised. It does see the brief return of talking animals, but they are part of what turns out to be a dream, so as far as we know, animals still don't talk in this universe. There's solid humor throughout the movie, and it was so stinkin' cute. I think this might be my favorite of the newer movies. 4 stars. Barbie Big City Big Dreams. For the first time ever, Black Barbie is canonically her own person. Historically, Mattel would release a black version of the main character in the Barbie movies instead of creating more black characters. But they would barely promote these dolls, and having a version of the character that never appears on screen hardly made up for the lack of actual representation. Big City Big Dreams introduces Barbie Roberts from Brooklyn, who quickly befriends Barbie Roberts from Malibu. Moving forward, she goes by Brooklyn and Blonde Barbie goes by Malibu. This one was another musical with a really great soundtrack. The musical numbers were easily the best part of the movie, but unfortunately the rest of it doesn't stack up. The writing was really oversimplified and poorly paced in ways that the previous 2 movies weren't. I'd revisit the soundtrack, but I probably wouldn't revisit the movie. 2 stars. Barbie Mermaid Power is kind of a sequel to Barbie Dolphin Magic, but it's really obvious that that wasn't the intention. The first 10 minutes is one giant exposition dump because they had to introduce all of these new ideas and concepts that weren't set up in the first movie. They introduce a mermaid named Aquaria who has a prosthetic fin. She's the first character to have a prosthetic, which was really cool to see because disability representation is pretty sparse in most media. She's also a well-developed character beyond her disability, and I think it was a really cute way to introduce the concept of having a disability to kids who may not be familiar with it. To me, this movie really exemplifies the problem with enforcing all of these specific parameters onto the new movies. It has a really interesting concept that definitely would have worked for a standalone movie, but because it had to force its way into the Dreamhouse universe, it suffered from having too many ideas. That issue probably would have been solved by having a longer runtime, but as I already mentioned, they don't make these movies longer than an hour anymore. And part of that hour had to be used on musical numbers, so that also took away from the plot. I really hate giving this a low rating because I did enjoy watching it for the most part, but I also can't say it's a good movie. It's the definition of wasted potential. 2 stars. Barbie Epic Road Trip. Okay, I fibbed a little bit when I said I saw every Barbie movie, because this one no longer exists. This was Barbie's first interactive movie with a choose-your-own-adventure type of story. The movie had several different endings depending on the choices that you made, including the ability to finally have Barbie and Ken become a couple. I really hate they did that though, because obviously whatever happens in this movie can't be canon with the rest of the movies, so Barbie and Ken's first kiss only exists in an alternate timeline. I'm super bummed I didn't get to watch this because based on the descriptions I read, I think I really would have liked it. Barbie Epic Road Trip premiered on Netflix in October 2022 and was removed in December 2024 when Netflix decided to remove all but 4 of its interactive titles. Because of the intricate nature of this type of movie and the fact that it was only available for 2 years, there isn't really any sort of preservation of the movie online. At least, not that I could find. I'm hoping the team at Mattel still has it and that maybe one day they'll upload it to YouTube and use timestamps to simulate a similar viewing experience, but as of right now, it's unfortunately lost media. Barbie, Skipper, and the Big Babysitting Adventure is pretty much entirely about Skipper, as Barbie is barely in it. This was the first movie to use a significant amount of 2D animation, which was mainly used to show Skipper's thoughts. It also has several Easter eggs from The Lost Birthday, as we see the return of Arlene as the boat captain and Chelsea's stuffed animals that were in that movie. For the first time, there was a post-credit scene setting up another movie, where Stacy hints at being the star of the next one. Overall, this was a good watch, but the plot feels like something I've seen before. 3 stars. Barbie and Stacy to the rescue. Oof, this one was tough to get through. Literally nothing happens in this movie. The title and setup make you think it's going to be about Stacy and Barbie going on an adventure in a hot air balloon, but instead it's a movie about Stacy being bored when she's told she isn't old enough to do that. Why someone would think that's an interesting plot to a movie? Your guess is as good as mine. And to top it off, the songs in this were so heavily auto-tuned they were unbearable to listen to. I noticed that the Dreamhouse era tends to insert the puppies into movies whenever there isn't enough of an actual plot, which was the case here. While the adorable dogs did improve my viewing experience, they're not enough to distract from the bad writing. I was bored out of my mind watching this. I feel bad because both Chelsea and Skipper got good movies that were entertaining to watch, and then they just completely dropped the ball with Stacy. This is easily the worst movie from this era, and probably one of the worst Barbie movies, period. 1 star. Barbie and Teresa Recipe for Friendship. This was cute, and it was definitely better than the last one, but I still found it kinda boring. The title says it's about Barbie and Teresa, but the main conflict is about the friendship between Malibu and Brooklyn. This feels less like a movie and more like a TV special. My cat seemed to like it though. 2 stars. So that's it for the existing Barbie movies, but we aren't done just yet. Earlier this year, Mattel announced that in honor of the 25th anniversary of Barbie and the Nutcracker, they would be releasing a new animated reimagining of the story. It stars Brooklyn and Malibu in the roles of the Sugar Plum Princess and Clara, so it seems that it will be continuing the trend of existing as part of the Dreamhouse Adventures universe. Personally, this news doesn't really excite me since I haven't been loving the new style of the movies, but alongside this announcement was another one that I think we can all get excited about. As you probably know, if you don't have the Barbie movies on DVD, the majority of them aren't easily accessible unless you pay to rent each one individually. Even at $3 a pop, renting all of the ones that aren't currently streaming on Netflix would set you back about $100, and you still wouldn't own a physical copy of it that you could watch at any time. As part of the anniversary celebration, Mattel is finally making these movies easily accessible by uploading them to the Barbie YouTube channel. At the time of recording, they've uploaded 6 movies so far on a seemingly monthly basis. This includes Big City Big Dreams, which implies that they will hopefully also be uploading all of the Netflix movies. I'm so freaking happy about this! Aside from this making the movies much more accessible, it also serves as a failsafe in case Netflix unceremoniously removes its Barbie movies, which we already saw happen with Epic Road Trip. This is something that we recently saw the Bratz do with all of their movies, so I'm happy to see another iconic movie franchise from my childhood take steps to preserve its media. Watching all of the Barbie movies back to back really put into perspective just how big of an impact this franchise has had. 44 going on 45 movies is a pretty insane amount. As for the current state of the movies, I think the choice to have them all take place in the same universe severely limits the possibilities for creativity, as well as the ability for them to work as standalone movies. These new self-imposed limitations also make it far more difficult for the movies to appeal to a wide audience, because if you aren't a fan of this new format, then chances are you aren't going to like any of the new movies. Barbie started as this character that could be inserted into any universe, and therefore had infinite possibilities for movies. Part of the beauty of that was the fact that every movie was its own experience, which resulted in people having completely different opinions on what they consider to be the best ones. It's been almost a decade since they've started the Dreamhouse era, and frankly, I'm tired of it. I don't think it's fair to just write off all the new movies as being bad, but I think they've done themselves a disservice by trying to force them all into one universe. The majority of Barbie movies can be watched and enjoyed without having knowledge of the other movies, which I think makes them easier to rewatch and to introduce to new people. I'm curious why Mattel has gone this route of having Barbie be a normal type of girl when Barbie's image for about 60 years has been her ability to be anything. Maybe I'm wrong, but I have a hard time believing that these movies where Barbie wears normal clothes are driving doll sales in a way that the original special-looking movie dolls didn't. Something that I love about all of the Barbie movies, even the ones I don't like, is that there is almost always a major emphasis on friendship and the importance of believing in yourself. That's something that's stayed consistent over the last 25 years, and it will hopefully continue to be the heart of Barbie movies as they inevitably continue to evolve. But what are your thoughts? Do you agree with the eras that I broke the movies into? Which era do you think was the best? Have you seen the new Barbie movies? What are your favorite Barbie movies? Let me know! If you liked this video, go ahead and subscribe for more nostalgic deep dives, and I will hopefully see you in the next one.